Now, I think this one goes out to each of you one at a time, really. What do each of you consider to be the one key trend or development in our industry over the next 12 months that's going to change the way in which we work?
If it's about the way we work in projects, I definitely think that more and more projects, especially software development projects, will start off doing Agile. I see, when I started Agile 15 years ago, it was actually a big fight. People were leaving rooms when I did presentations. That still happens, by the way, but just because they disagreed and they said, "Well, this is not going to work." And well, over the past 15 years, we've seen that it will work, and it will work increasingly. And the majority of organizations, large organizations, but also the small organizations, will do Agile development in the next 12 months at least, but in the next 15 to 20, maybe 30 years, until someone finds something better, which is not unlikely, but I think we will be more and more in Agile projects.
I think there's going to be increasing use of multiple device in the same experience. So we've been talking about dual screen for years in the BBC, and I think it goes beyond that into kind of orchestrating across several platforms and allowing people to take stuff from one place and move it onto another. And that's finally the technology, and people's Frankenstein technology is starting to catch up with that reality.
I think I'd want to say, I think entertainment has it, you know. I'm doing a lot with Connect at the moment. I'm doing some really cool stuff where we're using it to try and help people who sign communicate with people who don't. So sign language interpreters, that sort of thing. And so that's just one example of the use of a technology which, if you like, allows a lot more physicalness in your interaction with a computer. And I think there's actually something about, there's kind of two things there. I think the number of sensors that the computer has to pick up on, you know, what you want to do with it. I think, you know, hopefully we can do some really cool things to make the sort of products that we create more responsive to the person using them. And then I think just the other thing is that increasing kind of trend of gamification. You know, so if you make it fun, people will continue doing it. And it would be really great to think that work might be more fun. I don't know.
Which it isn't now? Or?
I don't know. I have a great time personally. But yeah, making work more fun. How about that? What do you reckon?
I think if we're going to make work more fun, we're going to have to find some more work. And I think the key trend that I think I see coming is we're going to have to try and understand what user experience means to people who live in China. Mm-hmm. If we're going to be an exporting industry and get this country out of the trouble it's in. And that's a different ball game to the one we're preaching today. I spent a week in Singapore last autumn, and I was just watching their adverts, and I'm thinking, there's no advertising theory I have ever taught which matches what's going on the television right now. And it might mean a complete rethink about what we think about user experience and the theories that go with it here. And if we don't do it, it'll be homegrown Chinese specialists who will do it, and we'll miss an opportunity.
I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction, and I think that from some of the work that I've done previously and some of the stuff that I'm doing now, I think using technology towards sustainability, I think, is probably going to be something that's pretty important in the next 12 months, in the next 10 years, in terms of designing products that allow us to be sustainable. So things like showers that the water changes color. It doesn't really change color, it's just lights in it that change color and tell you when you're beyond your 2 or 3 minutes or when you're getting close, so you know when to turn the water off. That has a little bit of a fun to it, helps kids learn how to do it. And then also technology and websites and messaging and using the persuasion to make people want to do the types of things that help us be more sustainable. So I think it's the products, it's the smart fridges that tell you when food's about to go off, or you can call your fridge and it tells you what's in there and what else you need to use the food that you have. So there's lots of issues around waste and water and the types of technology we use in our houses. We're all already seeing energy monitors, and from some of the work I've done is I've actually heard people say, I've stopped using my big oven now, so people have these massive, ovens to cook dinners for just the three of us, because the monitor told me how much energy I was using. So not a struggle, because she had 2 or 3 ovens anyway, and she had one that was smaller, so she used the other one. But so changing our behavior, making us understand consequences of what we do, and then also creating products that make that very easy for us as well.
Elisa, I don't know if you saw Chris Bush's presentation as well on Green Engage, the application for Intercontinental Hotels Group. So sustainable, how to make hotels sustainable, reduce their water consumption, energy consumption. So a great example, I think, of what you were talking about. And I think you're absolutely right.
There was a study done about how to get people to hang their towels up instead of leaving it on the floor and reuse them. Did Chris talk about that?
He didn't, but I think we're familiar with it. Yeah.
Where is he? Because I know I've talked to him about that before. But it's all about how you get people to do that by saying people in the world, people and getting it down to people like you. So it was down to, the message was people who stayed in this room. 80% of them hung their towel back up again and reused it. So it's about how getting people to be more sustainable in a place where they aren't normally.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, just throw this to the panel generally. Should the term user experience include usability and accessibility, or should they both be treated, or should they all be treated as separate disciplines?
So about 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, that's how I got a job. I was headhunted into my position of head of usability and accessibility at the BBC to do just that, bring those together, and as a result of those experiences, and then combining them with experiences of about 20 other people on a BSI panel and getting it reviewed by 500 people from all over the globe, we came up with British Standard 8878 that advocates just that. So I'm going to say yes, we should put them together, mostly because there are other ways of segmenting audience. And you wouldn't dream of saying, okay, should usability for men and usability for women be separate? There are probably as good, and if you think about it, there are enough sort of differences between the sexes. The way you might want to appeal to them in terms of emotional versus rational and all of those sorts of things to want to say, okay, we're going to segment there.
Go carefully, Jonathan.
And I think quite rightly you would find that rather offensive, because I think it is. So my perspective is that I use the word accessibility because people know what it is, kind of. But as far as I'm concerned, everybody wants a usable product. Actually, better than that, everyone wants a product that they love so much they want to tell all of their friends about. And it really shouldn't matter if you have a disability or not. In general, the way of thinking about it, if you just want to kind of put it down to brass tacks, is that you're all going to be disabled in some form or other unless you die early. So, not to put too much of a downer on it, but if you look at things in a sociological sense, or if you look at things in a personal sense, you all, the reason why we see disabled people as being them and not us is because we don't have a disability yet. But when you're drunk or when you get older, you're going to be feeling a lot more harmony with that way of thinking about things. So whether you want to call it as designing for your future self, or whether you want to look at the statistics coming out of Japan to find that the biggest population that is growing in the world at the moment is older people, who really are the people who are there, if you like, behind a lot of those accessibility things. I don't know. Making the two things separate, to me, just minimizes one. And in 50 years' time, I think you're going to find that's a really bad move to have made.
Yeah. I mean, my feeling is just that, when I have a client, we talk about usability versus accessibility, it's just really widening your audience or making your target audience to the right size and dimension. So they go hand in hand, because one means that you have a more realistic target audience. And, the stuff that I was talking about previously was about, user experience, about the persuasion. Usability and accessibility are a very strong part of that, because a site that has poor usability does reflect on your emotion. So how many times have you, used a website? We've all done it, and it's really rubbish, and it makes you angry, and you leave. So my user experience was really bad. It's just not the only thing, I think, and that we tend to look at it farther down the design line in terms of testing than we do in the beginning, because we design based on best practice and templates and things like that. But it's the user experience at the front end that we do more of the research on, and then the usability testing is more about, did we get it right?
So, Elisa, would you think of the term user experience as encapsulating those 3 points then? Usability, accessibility, and persuasion, or PET principles, or whatever you want to call it?
It's quite a lot of things, it's the whole experience. So, if I'm using a site and I have to call the service center, the call center, and the site's really bad, but I have a great experience calling the call center, and then they kind of laugh and say, yeah, we know that bit doesn't work, but here's how you do it, or let me fix that for you, then my experience changes. So the user experience is everything I touch. So we kind of talk about this 360 ecosystem. So, it's your product, it's your service, and I've got my user in the middle. And so everything that I touch, so, I hear your advertisements on radio, I see them on TV, I see them in a magazine, I use your website, I call your service, you call me and try and sell me things, whatever it is, you send me letters. So however that works, that whole thing is my user experience. So you can't, it's not one thing, it's very context specific. So you have to look at how you're engaging with your user, and all of that is touching the user experience.
Looking at this question, I think it seems to be, are the people who do the usability and accessibility part of the user experience team? To my mind, I'd say everyone who's on the multidisciplinary team is part of the user experience. It's good that you've got some people that can take primary responsibility for it, in the same way that you've got people who take primary responsibility for the finance or for the project management. But in practice, if my technical architect says, well, you can only have 4 frames per second for your transitions, that has a massive effect on the user experience, and that's a technical decision. So I think I don't like the idea of things going in boxes quite as much as this question is framed. I think that especially kind of accessibility and usability, we're very fortunate where I work that we can have people who concentrate just on the research, and user research in particular. But if I didn't consider them part of the team, then we wouldn't be able to operate as a team.
Here's an interesting one. How, if at all, do you think the ongoing global recession will impact our field?
Well, it's a two-wayer. It'll either make us think we really, really need to do something about what we're doing at the moment, otherwise we'll never sell. Or people will go, no, this costs too much, and it's the first thing to go. It's a bit like, the first sign of recession, everyone cuts their marketing and advertising, and you think, no, you need to be going the other way. You need to get out and sell more rather than cut back on the thing that will bring people in. My concern is that people will think of this as a luxury as opposed to, something that will make a hell of a difference. I think the field needs to market itself better. And one of the things that always makes me, want to get hold of some people say, we made this change as a result, and we've seen a 0.03% upturn in the number of people pressing this button. And it's the magnitude that needs to be sold. When you say, well, the number of people that pressed that button as a result of the change we made means we increased our revenue by £10 million. I think we need to sort of show the magnitude rather than the scientific. Unless we do a better job of selling this to clients who have got tight budgets, we'll lose all of the work, I think.
I'd be quite interested in getting any views from any folks from any digital agencies in the room. Certainly, as one ourselves, we find that our clients are not cutting back in usability and UX work, and maybe that's just because there's a greater awareness of these disciplines, or we're doing a good job of educating them about these disciplines, or what it is, I don't know. But I'd be interested to get any other views on that, whether others are finding that clients are cutting back. Joanne?
We've had a couple of clients who it's been harder to sell user testing and user research especially, because they kind of go back a couple of years and go, well, actually, we know our users, and we can save so much money by, just trusting what we think we already know rather than paying you to really go and find out. So, but then again, we still have clients who, are quite willing and know the benefits of going out and get there. But yeah, we have had a couple recently. It's hard to sell to.
Any other thoughts from the panel on this?
I was just going to say a couple of things. There's a really interesting piece of research that was probably done about 90 years ago, and it was about based on the Depression in the US in the 1920s and 30s, and that the companies in the US that actually advertised more during the Depression are the ones that didn't go out of business. So when you think about connecting with your customers, users, visitors, it's obviously very, very important. I think as well is the comment down the end about actually giving metrics that make sense is really important, but those are really hard to get. The problem is that your clients either won't let you go back in and measure, even if you set down, okay, what's your success metrics, and they're gonna measure them to see if you've been successful or not. They don't always give them to you. So they don't always want to know, but things like projects where we've done where we've rearranged checkout funnels and they've made 12 million more in a year, but we weren't allowed to tell anybody. So I just told you, but I didn't tell you who it was. But we weren't allowed to use that in terms of our case studies. We weren't allowed to say, oh yeah, we did this and this is how it turned out. So that's a really difficult position that it puts us in as practitioners. But I don't think I think people now understand better innovation, and they understand, leapfrogging the competition and things like that. And you can't do innovation and you can't be creative if you don't know the problem that you're solving. And you're saying, they think they know their users, but we know they don't. So it's those people who understand their limitations in actually being a user, and there's lots of them that still don't, will understand that in order to be competitive and to have some sort of innovation, that they need to continue on.
Yeah, good. One of the things that I find quite depressing, that is the right word, is that metrics, I think, is everything. I think it's the business case, certainly when it comes to accessibility. If anyone's read my blog, but I did some accessibility myths sort of over Christmas, and the main thing I was looking at was return on investment. And the real difficulty, I characterised work that is done to engage disabled people and SEO work. And I compared and contrasted the two. And if you can imagine your SEO consultant, it's a really easy sell. For this particular search term, you are at Google rank 8. How much money will you pay me to get to Google rank 1? The great thing is you're a Google rank 8 because everyone can find it really easily. If this guy has done it because you're at Google rank 1, and it's really easy to figure that out as well. And he can pretty much say things like, you know what, don't pay me anything unless I deliver. The really scary thing is that when it comes to doing stuff that helps people with disabilities, if someone asks me how many disabled people are using my website at the moment, I have no answer. If I then say, well, we spend loads of money making your website actually better for disabled people to use, then how many people are using the website? I have no idea. That's a really crap business case. So I have a tool which is trying to sort of solve that one and trying to, if you like, surface some of this information. But that all goes into the privacy sphere. And the big thing that is coming along in May is the cookie law. So a lot of the metrics that we're going to need to be able to base ROI, conversions, all of those sorts of things are in direct conflict with decisions from the EU government, but now down to ours, that say that we will not be able to collect that information without seriously undermining the user experience of everyone coming to our sites. I think that's appalling. So my wife's a data protection professional, and she wants to leave the profession because she's basically going around telling people that they can't do sensible things at the moment, and she's sick of it. So I think it's going to be hard, I think is the short thing, because I think fundamentally it has to be about those metrics, and we have to get very skilled at being able to say that, to put a value on the work that we do under circumstances where it becomes harder and harder to actually get that data. I don't know, write to your MP, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions from the room?
Question for Sander. What advice would you have for somebody who's looking to start being more agile and start to look at ways to adopt the methodology?
Well, the very, very first question you need to ask yourself is, why am I doing this? Do I need to change? What do I want to change? Do I need to change? So there's different motives of starting with agile. There's people saying, hey, we want to deliver more on time and within budget. There's people saying we want to increase our productivity or deliver better quality, or there's a whole lot of reasons for doing that. So you have to establish the reasons for moving to agile first. And as you said, it's a hype, basically. So there's a lot of CEOs going to a Gartner conference, for instance, and Gartner says, go agile, and everybody comes back and says, well, we need to go agile. And a lot of people don't stop and think why they're going agile. So first of all, you need to get your goals out there and get them really clear. So you can actually measure, there's the metrics again, so you can actually measure what you're doing and if you're improving on what you want to improve. And then agile, it's not a goal, it's a means. It's a way of achieving different goals. So getting your goals out is the first thing you do. And the next thing you do is actually, there's a lot of things you can do. For instance, you can start with sending people to a training course, which is pretty obvious, of course, but it's necessary. And it's also, it's very much a cultural change. It's that people will work differently with each other than they did before. And to a lot of people, it's either challenging or threatening, in that they have their own piece of work and this is my territorium and here's what I do. And it becomes a lot more fuzzy in what people do and how they interact and how they work together. So it's a cultural change and you have to be aware of that. And the next thing I would give as advice is don't start your next very big project doing agile stuff, because doing that you need to pick your first project, a project which is likely to be successful anyway. That's well, the reason behind it is pretty simple, is that if you start off doing the really big next thing, for instance, rebuilding your mortgage application if you're a large bank, which I've done for a few banks in the Netherlands. Actually, they'll build the same software anyway, but they do that every 5 years, and it's a really, really big project. And then this bank comes along and says, well, we're going to do this agile, and it fails. So what happens if it fails? If your first project, when you want to move to agile, fails? And there's a lot of people in the company who will actually say, well, this doesn't work, and go back to what they've done before, which also doesn't work, by the way. But so if you find a small project with a small team that it can be committed, with people who actually want to change, and the success rate can be much higher than if you do the large project, it will spread out. And that's the best thing you can do. Make it visible, and make people see what happens, make it measurable, so you can actually see what the successes that you have, and start small.
Question for David, and it's more of an academic question really. Just whether academia has a problem trying to define user experience. And I say that because I've been looking at some postgraduate taught courses around Britain, and the offerings seem to vary quite considerably depending on what school teaches it. So, for example, if it's an art school, user experience design seems to be more artistic in a way that enhances users, physically, say if they're visiting a museum or something like that, I don't know, through to, say, the really computer science, like HCI kind of stuff, and maybe if it's a business school, very metric-based. So trying to pick a course on this kind of stuff, it doesn't seem to be very easy, so I just wanted to pick your brain about that.
It's lucky you should ask that question. And I promise I did not put this question in. But I do a lot of work with e-consultancy, and we spent a long time thinking about that question. And we came to a conclusion just as at the same time that there was quite a bit of fashionable talk about if you replace the word user with customer, you get a very different view of the kind of course you should be teaching. So we've created a graduate certificate in customer journey management, and that has a very specific theme because it's about moving people who have some kind of intention to purchase, or you want to create an intention to purchase within those people. So for us, it's not a technical discipline or an artistic discipline or a marketing discipline. It's all of those things combined to create some ultimate goal, which is people buy stuff. But I think you're right. I think the historic way universities have been made out, which is along Victorian lines, where things are in silos, and MMU is as guilty as any other university, where we've got usability lab in science and engineering, we've got our art and design people doing the front end stuff, and we've got people over in the business school doing the marketing. I think everyone I speak to is pretty much aware that we've got to bring this together as a cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary, almost like a subject in its own right. And I think a number of institutions are gearing themselves up to dealing with that. It's going to be slow. I think some places will really struggle to do it. But I work very closely with my science and engineering and art school colleagues in order to be able to deliver a programme like this, because we realise all of the skills are not contained in one faculty, they're actually contained in one institution. So it's actually caused us to work in a very different way and hopefully punch something out that is what's desired.
I would also say that I've run many UX teams, and the most valuable people are those that understand how to do research and then understand how to connect those insights to design. So what are the implications for that? And those are the most valuable people on the market. And they're hard to find. And they aren't created out of universities. So you cannot walk out of a university and be one of those people unless you have previous experience. So it's not something that's easy to do. It's something that's easier to learn how to do within a big group. But what I would say is that having that foundational, fundamental academic background that tells you why we do things, when we do it, what's all the research behind it. You may not use it, in work. You probably, if you're, working in consultancy, you won't be doing academic type studies, and you won't be having 6 months to design something. But you will understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and why you're not doing it and the risks that you're taking. But the most important bit is that, you can't be everything to everyone. But the thing that you can do is be the person that connects, understands the research, and then connects those insights to design. And that's where the creativity and the innovation happens. I hear what people are saying, I hear what the business is saying, and I hear what the users are saying, or the customers, or whatever you want to call them. And from that, my creativity and my innovation comes to creating a solution that I design. So it's very important to have those two things. And then, I've worked with loads of, I'm not a marketing person, but I always, there's always seems to be one around. I'm always willing to help and provide you with all sorts of data. So those people are around. There's always a technical person around to tell you about feasibility. But what is more difficult to find is that UX person that can connect those two things.
Thank you. I think we'll wrap up the panel discussion now. Please join me in thanking our panel, Jane Murison, Sander Hoogendoorn, Elisa Delgado, Jonathan Hassell, and David Edmundson-Bird. Thank you.